What's up guys? Jason coming back at you from the Piscifun YouTube channel. Today we're doing a video on how to catch deep water summer largemouth. So stay tuned, hopefully we'll get some good ones for you. Okay guys, the first step before we start chasing these deep water largemouth is figuring out where they live. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you our hummingbird, we're gonna do a little bit of side imaging and a little bit of down imaging, and we're gonna mark the weed lines. These deep fish really like relating to the deep weed lines because that's where their forage is. They're usually down there chasing bluegills, crappies, perch, or some sort of a bait fish. So come with me and we'll show you a little bit of side imaging and how to locate these deep largemouth. Okay guys, so now we're doing our side imaging. What I want you to notice is what our speed is, and I'm gonna show you something here. There's something called chart speed. So you wanna closely match that number to this number. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna drop our chart speed down a little bit. It'll give us a better picture. So as we're side imaging and we're going through and trying to locate the weed edge, we're just gonna take a waypoint and we're gonna drop it on that edge. So you're simply gonna take it, you're gonna locate it on the edge and hit mark. And then you're gonna clear it again, side image some more of the weed line, take it about another 50 to 60 feet up and hit mark again. And we're gonna do this for several hundred yards. And ultimately what we're gonna have on our graph is a nice line of waypoints showing us exactly where that weed line is. Okay guys, so what I wanna show you here, now that we've done a bunch of side imaging and we've dropped our waypoints along the weed edge, I wanna show you a point that we've actually been able to outline. So if you take a look here, right in this area, you'll notice the weed edge. This is what we call an inside turn of the weed edge. Then it comes out to the outside turn of the weed edge. Here's the point, another inside turn right in here, and then it comes back out to the weed line. So what you want to do to be the most effective in targeting this area is to really focus on where these turns are. Those end up holding quite a bit of bait fish, in turn holding largemouth. And then additionally, what you have up here is going to be a little weed flat on this point. So oftentimes you'll be able to cast a bait and work it down along this point and pull some big fish off of there as well. Okay guys, the first technique we're gonna talk about when it comes to catching deep water largemouth is using a football jig. Now a football jig is a very versatile bait. It allows you to get down there deep and get down there quickly. So what I like to do is take this football jig and make a parallel cast along the deep weed edge. And what you're gonna do is just drag that football jig right down the line of that edge. What happens is those largemouth are sitting on the weed edge, and as that jig comes down, they come out and they ambush it. Now, you can use this bait fast or you can fish it slow. A lot of times, a real sharp snap of the rod will cause this bait to jump up and fall down rapidly. Typically, what I look for when I'm using a football jig in deep water is at least a ½ ounce, and sometimes if I'm in 20 feet plus, I'll go to a 3/4 ounce size. When it comes to my setup, I like using a Piscifun Serpent casting series. I prefer something from a 7'3" to a 7'6" medium heavy. The reason I like a longer rod is it allows me to pick up more line when I'm fishing that deep water. And the backbone allows me to make sure that that thick hook on the jig penetrates the bony mouth of the largemouth. Now, when it comes to a reel on this specific setup, I'm using a Piscifun Torrent. This is a 7.1 to 1 gear ratio. Anytime I'm using a football jig, I like to use a gear ratio that's a little bit faster. The reason is when you set the hook on that fish in deep water, the fish tends to want to either run for the surface or run for the deeper water. It allows you to keep up with that fish if you have a faster gear ratio. Normally on a football jig rod, I will use a 15 to 17 pound fluorocarbon. Hook sets on jigs are pretty stout, so the last thing you want to do is have light line and break the line on your hook set. There's one, guys, on the jig. And he thumped that jig. I think I'm just gonna swing this one right forward. It doesn't seem very big. Nope. About 15 inches, 16 inches. There you go, guys. Here's a nice summer largemouth on a football jig. Not a giant, but I will take these fish all day long when you're fishing deep water. Everything in deep water that bites feels so much bigger, so it really makes it a blast when you're catching these fish. The second deep water largemouth set up in our lineup is going to be the 10-inch worm. Now the 10-inch worm is definitely a popular bait down south. But what a lot of people here in the Midwest don't know is it's super effective on northern strain largemouth as well. So when summer rolls around, fish have lower oxygen levels, which means they get a little bit lethargic. Now there's nothing better to a big largemouth than a big, easy meal that's moving slowly across the bottom. The setup is really easy, but it's a little bit different than a typical Texas rig. So what I like to do is use a 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce weight depending on the depth that I'm fishing. And it's a similar technique that you're gonna see is we really wanna run that bait right along that weed edge. But what a Texas rig allows us to do is actually get that bullet weight up into those weeds and have it come through free. Whereas a jig, we weren't able to do that. Now, when you're using this, I don't wanna use a bobber stop or anything to stop this weight from sliding up and down the line. Now the reason I don't do that is because I want this weight to fall ahead of the worm, and then I want this worm to slowly fall down behind that weight. A lot of times on the initial cast, that's gonna cause a reaction strike from the fish as it falls from below. Now, when it comes to my setup, same scenario. Typically I use a 15-pound to 17-pound fluorocarbon, but when it comes to my rod, I'm gonna use something that's either 7'1" to 7'3". Now the reason I like that is because when you're getting a bite on a Texas rig, you almost wanna pick up on that fish and just make sure that it's got it before you set the hook. This medium heavy rod and that 7'3", 7'1" is gonna be a perfect rod for that technique. Now when it comes to your reel, similar to using a jig, I want something that's above a 7.0 gear ratio. So I have on this rod the Piscifun Phantom. This carbon reel is really light and allows me to fish all day and pull that worm through the weeds without having fatigue. So next time you go out and you're chasing deep water largemouth, don't be afraid to give that big 10-inch worm a try. There's one, guys. On the big worm. Oh, this feels like a good one. Look how big. That, guys, is what you are looking for when you're trying to get deep water largemouth. That is a beautiful fish there, guys. Check that one out. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, don't be afraid to throw a big worm in the Midwest, guys. It is worth it. Check that out. So the third bait in our deep water largemouth lineup is a familiar one. This is the drop shot. So anytime you're fishing deep water, a drop shot is a super effective technique. The beauty of the drop shot is you're able to bring a very finesse system down to those deep fish, and oftentimes, depending on the body of water you're on, many of these fish may have never seen that presentation. So it can be very effective in picking up the bigger fish out of a school. Now, something that's a little bit different about the way that I drop shot compared to some folks when I'm in deep water is I actually like to use a really long lead line. I call this deep water wacky rigging. Now, deep water wacky rigging allows you to basically take a shallow water technique like wacky rigging and put it down into that 20 to 25 foot deep water drop shot range. Now, that long lead line allows you to feed the bait slack and allow that bait to fall naturally for that 2 to 3 feet of the leader. Then you snap it back up and you allow it to fall, all the while keeping that weight in one spot on the bottom. I still use just a regular size 2 drop shot hook. I simply wacky rig the worm on there. I'm using a Get Bit stick bait on this one. And I'm using a 1/4 ounce to a 3/16 ounce weight. It allows me to keep that weight on the bottom even when I'm snapping that worm. Now, when it comes to my setup, I'm using a Piscifun Honor XT2000. I also like a Carbon X2000. Both of those reels are very great, very good drag, and it allows you to get some good hook sets on those fish when you're drop shotting. Now, when it comes to my rod, I'm using a Piscifun Serpent Series 7'2" medium light. The 7'2" medium light gives you a few things. It gives you casting distance, it gives you a great backbone, but it also allows that extra length on the rod to help fight those big fish once they get close to the boat. When it comes to my line, I like to use a 12 to 15 pound braid main line, and then because I'm drop shotting around really heavy weeds right now, I actually like to use a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. That 10-pound fluorocarbon leader is really gonna save you when those big largemouth bury you in the weeds. It allows you to put pressure on them and get them topside. So next time you guys go out and chase some deep water largemouth, do a little deep water wacky rigging. the drop shot fish, guys. Trying to jump, trying to keep them down. Favorite part about drop shot, guys, is you have this light line. You have this light line, light rod. Makes it so fun. There we go, guys. Nice drop shot fish. Again, you've got Piscifun Honor XT paired with a Serpent Series rod. Killer drop shot setup. Go ahead and get that one back. Last but certainly not least for our deep water largemouth techniques is the Carolina rig. Now, Carolina rig is certainly famous for fishing deep cover, but it's also great for fishing deep weed lines. So one thing that I like to do a little bit differently on this is I do not use a glass bead when I'm Carolina rigging deep clear water largemouth. Now, a lot of anglers may be concerned about the knot strength and having problems with that weight banging against their knot, but personally for me, that tick of that glass when I'm in really clear water actually seems to make those largemouth shy away from your bait more often than not. So I remove the glass bead out of my sequence in this Carolina rig. Now, when it comes to my weight, I want to use a nice 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce weight, depending again on how deep that I'm fishing. The deeper you go, the heavier you go for your weight. When it comes to my leader, I want a nice long 2.5 to 3.5 foot leader. That long leader is going to allow that bait to sit up in the water column and fall nice and slow down behind that bullet weight. Now, a Carolina rig is a little bit different than most rigs, being that your pendulum is about 3 feet above your bait. So you want a long rod like a 7'6" that allows you to make some nice wide casts and really get that bait out there. Again, similar to the other casting reels in this segment, we always want to use something that's going to be above that 7.0 gear ratio. When you set the hook, you want to make sure that you're able to get that fish up out of the weeds and to the boat. Not to mention, when using a Carolina rig, you really have to snap that weight up off the bottom first before you actually get hook penetration into the fish's mouth. So a Carolina rig is definitely in my top 4 most deadly deep water largemouth baits. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Head on over, check us out on Instagram, and hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. We'll see you on the water next time.